Good morning, engineers. Today we're going to look at the new solid-state logic Fusion. Now, the Fusion is an all-analog hardware mixed bus processor, a bit like the black box HG2 and the louder than lift or silver bullet that came before. These are boxes that are designed to add some warmth, character, weight, space, and well, just about every other descriptive word we can think of for analog to your cold, sterile digital in-the-box mixes. So the idea is that you strap these boxes across your DAW's tubers and it adds some analog mojo, and then you record those results back into your DAW and voila, you have a mix that's smothered in that elusive analog sound that makes us all smile. Apparently anyway. But is it really worth it? I mean, can't we just do the same with plugins? Well, let's find out. So the first thing I can say about this is that it feels solid. Now, apparently these things are assembled in China now, so I thought it might feel a bit cheap, but it's actually quite sturdy and weighty. Now, the reason I think that's important is because one of the reasons we come out of the box is for that hands-on experience. You can't beat that, kind of like that tactic feedback from hardware, but that only really works if the hardware feels nice to the touch. And this does, these parameters here have just the right amount of resistance, and these push buttons here have a really positive feel to them. My only concern is how long these push buttons are going to last for, because there's going to be an awful lot of punching in and out while you're working on a mix. I'm not quite sure how long these would last. But it does ooze the typical SSL quality. So essentially this is 5 analog processors stuffed into a hardware box. As you can see there, we start with a high pass filter, then we go into a vintage drive circuit, we have low and high shelf EQs, a high frequency compressor, and a mid-side kind of stereo image enhancer. And we also have this transformer here. No controls for this though, just a button to kind of bring it in and out of the circuit. Now the signal path starts with this input gain here, but this is only for gain staging, so it's difficult to get excited about this. It doesn't add any saturation with all of these processors here switched off. Now I was kind of hoping here that if I engaged that transformer there and you increase this input trim here, it would influence the amount of saturation running through this transformer, but it doesn't. This transformer seems to be on a completely separate circuit. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a disappointment, but this does have kind of a useful center indent there. In fact, quite a few of them do. Obviously our EQ there has center indents. They don't. That does there. And obviously the output trim there has a center indent. So next up, we've got obviously the high pass filter. Nothing special about this really. I mean, you can leave it out of the circuit, you can drop it to 30, 40 or 50 there, and that's just a third order 18 decibel per octave slope. So after that, we get into the more interesting territory here, which is kind of this vintage drive circuit, and we've got a drive and a density. Now with the density here, you kind of use it to morph through second and third order harmonics, and this drive here determines how much of that effect is applied. Now, if you know SSL, it sounds like they borrowed this from the VHD circuitry from the preamps on the AWS, but listening to it, I don't think it is. If you've never heard of VHD, it stands for Variable Harmonic Drive, and it was first introduced into the SSL duality consoles, and it now appears in their standalone preamp channels like this. Now, VHD is an analog circuit that can be switched in or out of the preamp, and it lets you apply second or third order harmonic distortion or a blend of the two. And then the more you drive this input gain here, the more distortion is applied. Sound familiar? This though sounds very different to the VHD. The VHD tends to add a crunch to the sound where this doesn't. It kind of adds more of a kind of rounded tone. And obviously, if you've seen that, you can punch this in and out of the circuit. And you also get this fancy tricolour LED there to let the depth producers know if they're hitting it too hard. I think it turns red, but I'm colourblind so I can't see it. I can just see lights, so I've just got to rely on my ears rather than actually seeing the colour of it. The only problem I have with this is not compensated at the output here. So if you increase this drive here, the signal level increases and then you have to reduce the output gain. The only fancy thing about this is the drive. As you can see there, it goes up to 11. I imagine that's a reference to to Spinal Tap. And after that, we move on to these shelving filters that SSL have called a Violet EQ. Apparently, these are an all-new design. As you can see, the low shelf has 30, 50, 70 and 90 Hz, while the high shelf here has 8, 12, 16 and 20. These are all stepped there, and the center gains here are indented. So you can apply positive or negative gain to the shelf. I think it's plus and minus 9 decibels, but I'm not 100% sure. You can always download the manual and have a read of that. And again, obviously, we can bypass them if required. Now, after those comes this, a high frequency compressor. Now, these are kind of tape emulator. What you do is you choose the frequency range you want to compress, and then you lower the threshold or increase the threshold there until it's applying the amount of compression that you want. Now, typically, this is useful for rolling off any harsh frequencies, but there's no attack or release settings. Apparently, these are fixed to maintain the best transparency according to SSL. Now, I can understand that that's going to simplify the workflow of all this. It makes it a lot easier, but I'm a big boy. I would have liked an attack and release on here to play with as well, so I could have had that bit more control over what this is doing. And again, obviously, we can bring it in, or we can bypass it there. And then finally, we have this mid-side stereo image. Now, the width here obviously determines the volume of the stereo information, the side information. The space here, it's a bit weird. It boosts or cuts the bass frequencies in the side signal. Now, I've personally always been careful with the amount of LFE information I'm going to throw into a side signal, but SSL in the manual do the best to assure you that it's really useful. Now, I've used this only a few times on a mix job that I've just finished, so I'm on the fence with it at the moment. If you push this above like about 4 dB there, it just sounds really abnormal. Apparently it's supposed to add depth, but it just sounds weird. I imagine this is probably more useful for individual stems than a full mix, and obviously we can bring that in and out as well. And at the end we have this transformer here that we can kick in and out with the press of a button. As I've said before, no parameters at all, and increasing this input gain doesn't affect it, so you just either bring this in or out. That's it, that's all you can do with that. And that's pretty much it. It's obviously been kept very simple so you can quickly dial in some mojo without having to concern yourself too much with the more involved assets of mixed bus work. But I do feel it's missing a compressor. You see, you can insert a compressor into the signal path pre or post EQ there using a pair of insert XLRs at the rear of this, but there's only one pair of inserts. You see, if you press and hold this insert button here, it switches it so you can use the left insert to modify the mid channel and the right insert to modify the sides on this stereo image here. So you could, for example, bring in a couple of mono compressors from your DAW to modify the mid and side signals individually, provided obviously you have enough outputs on your audio interface. But there's only one set of inserts at the back of this, so it's either the mid side or you bring a compressor in. I would have liked the chance to have both, or at least fit a compressor into this thing. And then of course we have just the output gain there. We have a global bypass there, and we've got some meters that aren't exactly fancy, but they are functional. So the big question we're going to ask is, how does it sound? Well, this is where things become difficult. You see, the Fusion is a box that is a sum of its parts, and listening to just, for example, the analog drive circuit, or just the EQ, or just the transformer, doesn't really represent what it can do. But then listening to the shelving filters set to that usual smiley EQ curve is going to make any mix sound better, whether it's a DAW plugin or the SSL EQ. So it kind of puts you in a difficult position when it comes to audio examples. So all I can really do here is call up a selection of tracks that I've recently finished or that I'm currently working on and throw them through the hardware so you can hear how it performs. So let's have a listen.
find. Now these memories taking me back sometimes when I lost my mind, but I'm quite alright tonight. And every second is hard to find, lost track of time, staring at the sky tonight. Sometimes when I lost my mind, but I'm quite alright tonight. And every second is hard to find, lost track of time, staring at the sky tonight. sometimes when I lost my mind, but I'm quite alright tonight. And every second is hard to find, lost track of time, staring at the sky tonight.
Well, the effect is subtle, but it's noticeable. I think each mix benefited from the Fusion, but there are so many possible configurations and creative choices in this box that I could easily spend the next couple of days playing demos to you using a variety of different settings, and I really don't think it would help. You simply have to try one of these and get a feel for it. I mean, it's SSL, it sounds great, it feels great, and in case you're wondering, yes, you can do the same thing with plugins. The Fusion is simply a hardware alternative to throwing a load of plugins on your mix bus. Now, while this hardware will obviously give you more of that analog sound than a collection of plugins ever will, it's not really a case of sounding better than plugins. I think workflow also plays a role here. I mean, why do DJs use decks rather than software emulations of them? Why do audio interfaces have physical gain controls when we could just do the same thing in software? Why are we always investing in DAW controls and fader banks and various other controller gadgets? Well, they're all to make the whole process of creating music more hands-on. It's infinitely more fun than pushing a plastic box across a mat on your desk. Now, mix bus processing is some of the most important processing you're ever going to apply. And I've really enjoyed being able to do that without having to stare at my screen. It's a great hands-on unit that just begs to be tweaked while you listen to what it does. Now, I've got to admit here, it's far from perfect. I'm not a fan of the limited high-pass filter. Rolling 30 Hz off the bottom of a mix is common practice, but 40 and 50 Hz suggests that it's designed for stem work. So why not include a few more frequencies in that? I mean, 75 Hz is useful for vocals, but we've got no roll-off for that. And perhaps more importantly than that, where's the bus compressor? I mean, for an SSL unit, a hardware unit, and for SSL to produce this, specifically designed to enhance your 2-bus and not include the G-series compressor. I mean, that compressor on the 2-bus is the sound of SSL. But perhaps most bemusing of all is that the power switch is located at the rear of the unit. Now, who in their right mind wants to scrabble around the back of their racks looking for a black power switch amongst a spaghetti junction of wires on a black box in a dimly lit studio? But despite all that, I've got to admit, I still find it really appealing. This is one of those boxes that you read about and you think, I can do the same thing with plugins. But when you get your hands on one, it really does change your mind. I mean, it's not particularly innovative, but there is something inexplicably addictive when you start to use it. It sounds great and it's just so hands-on. The more I use it, the more I want to use it. Now, if I'm honest with you here, my original thoughts were, what I'll do is I'll buy one, I'll give it a go, and if it doesn't do something that my plugins can't, then I'm going to return it. Now, while it's obviously more analog than any plugin collection you can get, the sonic difference isn't night and day. You're not going to be surprised at the difference between this unit and plugins. But combine the SSL sound with the hands-on approach to mix bus work, and it's just so much fun. And isn't that what we do this for?